It goes without saying, Dalit History Month is equated with Dalit rights and justice. With the fact that 75 years since independence, Dalits have still not been allowed their spot in the sun. That the cancer of untouchability has never really been eradicated from our society. That even today, atrocities against Dalits continue, oppression worsens. That Dalits themselves remain fractured within and do not understand the power of unity, and hence get left behind in education and hence more wounded by joblessness. It has been a long struggle, fought amidst social discrimination and political disinterest and callousness, that keeps the light at the end of the tunnel in shadows, flickering at best. Hello everyone, welcome to another edition of Off Limits. Our guest this time is Martin Macwan, who is a well-known figure in Gujarat and indeed the country. He's a Dalit human rights activist. He has been very vocal against untouchability. And today, I think you're involved in a very interesting movement, which is about minting a brass coin, which you are presenting to Parliament after a march from Ahmedabad to New Delhi. And the inscription on it, and actually the Citizen carried a report, is that will the 1947 dream of untouchability-free India be a reality in 2047? That could actually be even the topic of this conversation, Mr. Macwan. So tell us more about it, and welcome to the program.
Thank you. So, as rightly printed on the coin, the question is that we as a nation have failed during last 75 years of independent India to abolish untouchability. And what Dr. Ambedkar had said, that while the country has become independent politically, we still have to build a nation. And nation cannot happen unless the values of equality, fraternity, and liberty are becoming part of the natural way of life of the citizens. And so we wonder what is the meaning of Indian independence if even after 75 years, the untouchability continues to rule the public life. So we took the occasion of the building of the new Parliament House in Delhi, and we drew the inspiration from a legendary history of Gujarat, where in the erstwhile state of Patan, a Dalit man had to be made to sacrifice his life to get water for the state. And he agreed on the condition that the untouchability symbols have been removed and done away with. That was done, which is still the protected site by the ASI. So to remember that history of Megh Maya's sacrifice to remove untouchability, people, when they build a new house, they put a coin in the foundation of the new house. And so we said we are going to give a coin to the Parliament to place it in the foundation of the new building so that they remember that that is the constitutional mandate which we have failed and which we still need to complete it. So this is the coin. People donated brass utensils from the homes across the country. We got about 2,450 kilograms of brass, and still maybe 3 times is holding back in the villages. We said enough. At the same time, we said we also requested people to make a donation of 1 rupee per person in a family to donate it to the Parliament. No matter they have 20,000 crores with them, but every citizen must claim that this is my Parliament. My grandchildren must say that my granny or my grandfather donated 1 rupee to this building. So we must give it to the Parliament. The appeal was well accepted, and till this day, we have more than 13 lakh, 1.3 million coins with us. and the number is going up. It may go up to more than 2.5 million and more.
Right.
So this is the whole campaign.
And when do you plan to do this? When do you plan to march? It'll come from all over India, or is it confined to states?
Yeah, so it will start from Gujarat on maybe 8th of August.
Okay.
And reach Delhi by 13th of August 2022.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, now you've talked of history, so let me go back a little bit. Now, history, as we all know, gives us solutions to the future, and it also teaches us lessons, and it also forebodes us about what might happen. Now, one of the mistakes, and I think you've underlined it somewhere where I've read also, is one of the mistakes that we have made, or would you call it a mistake is the question really, in our interpretation of our recent history, pre-independence and post-independence particularly, is to pit literally Gandhi against Ambedkar. And somehow make it out, and a lot of Dalit groups also doing that, forget the others for whom there is a vested interest anyway. Where we are making out that the two didn't really get along, and the two had slightly different understanding about rights, Dalit rights, and the question of untouchability. What do you think?
I think that's unfortunate, and because we don't read history properly. And Gandhi, when he was setting up the ashram in Ahmedabad in 1915, there was a Dalit family from Bombay that was sent to him by Amrutlal Thakkar, a very known member of also, I think, Constituent Assembly. And so when the family came, the milkmen stopped giving milk and the farmers stopped giving water to the ashram. And the first person who raised the fight with Gandhi was Kasturba herself, stamping her feet and said, if you want to keep that woman with you, go ahead and keep it here, but not in the kitchen. And Gandhi said, look, Kasturba, that women will be in the kitchen. Yes. Gandhi was a shrewd politician. He didn't believe probably that women should be in the kitchen, but he knew where the bomb will come from. And then Kasturba says, then I will leave you. And Gandhi says, if you are planning to leave tomorrow, it will be better that you leave today. And I, as a husband, will make sure that I pay for your costs. And, finally, Kasturba says, I'm a Hindu woman, unfortunate woman, no matter how bad the husband is, I can't leave. And she stayed back, and then her heart changed. And once she picked up the young daughter, Lakshmi, of the Dalit couple in her hand. So that was the history. And Gandhi, the donations to the ashram stopped until ration of only one day was left. And Gandhi said, we will close the ashram and shift it to the Valmiki colony across the ashram, but not compromise with the question of untouchability. I think this is something which has not been taught properly in our school books. And this is something which has not been part of our education system, because this is something to do with social change, right? So here we are making about 40 small coins or brass coins of 1 foot diameter and taking it to different places. So we are donating one to the ashram of the Narayan Guru in Kerala, because he did that movement apart from Ayankali, he did that in Kerala. We are taking one to Periyar's place in Tamil Nadu. We are taking one to the Amritsar Golden Temple, because it was Guru Nanak Dev who said, Pehle Sangat, Baad mein Pangat. That's how third Guru institutionalized the whole Langar system against the untouchability. We are giving one to Gandhi Ashram in Gujarat. Yes. So one to Ravidas temple in Jalandhar. We are taking it to the place of Pavir, to the Varanasi, to Bodh Gaya, because these have been the places of history which we have forgotten very conveniently. This has not been taught to the generation, for a purpose, Everybody will remember the names of the heroes and heroines today, but not of those people who changed the history. we hold this history very dear to the whole Dalit movement. And as we define, Dalit is not the identity of a caste. It is a moral position of people who believe in equality.
Right.
All those
Right.
people who believe in equality are the Dalits, right? There are only two castes in this country: those who believe in equality and those who are against inequality. That's the end of it.
Right.
Yeah.
So, when we look in recent years or how it all developed, there was a lot of patience in the first flush of independence. Everybody was looking for better times and was hoping and had believed the founding fathers that, you will be converted soon into a paradise of equality. That did not happen. And obviously, untouchability has remained an issue through the years, through successive governments, through successive promises and elections. What would you say is the biggest, the biggest reason for why the Dalits have not been able to get their own space and equal space and a just space in this country?
My understanding is that we lack a political will in this country to remove untouchability. And as Dr. Ambedkar had rightly warned, and said that this is so because it is held as a part of the religion. Yeah, and unfortunately, while it is part of the scriptures of the Hinduism, whether it is Manusmriti or the Rig Veda, Islam and Christianity, which do not have mentions about this thing at all in the scriptures, continue to practice untouchability.
Yes, I was going to ask you that also.
It is. And therefore, it has two sides. One is that there is an untouchability between the so-called Dalits and the non-Dalits. And on the other hand, there is an equal amount of untouchability between the within subcaste of the Dalits. Yes, and now Sajan did the biggest survey of understanding untouchability, how much untouchability exists in Gujarat, a 2010 study, which we identified about 98 forms of discrimination related to untouchability. We did both the untouchability between Dalits and non-Dalits and within Dalits. On the second hand, there is another set of dimension that caste and gender are two sides of the same coin, right? And which we don't understand in that and context. So the slavery of the women, the ill treatment of the women stems from the same ideology, religious ideology, which is binding caste, that women are lower and they're the slaves to the man. Now, this is in direct contravention with the Indian Constitution. Yes. So if we had the political will to make Constitution is the real force, then definitely, we would have taken care of the social reform side. Yeah. So in history, in 1920, when the Congress decided to drop the agenda of social reform, saying once we get the political reform, this is something we're going to change overnight. And Dr. Ambedkar had warned that look at the history of the whole world. Nowhere in the history it has happened that once you are politically independent that you will worry about the social reforms, because the same forces who are dominant in any society will take over that role of the oppressors, right? Absolutely. And so this is what has happened. So I think I did one of the biggest march in Gujarat, about 100 days walking from village to village, saying unless and until we within the Dalits we remove untouchability and make equality as a value, we will not have a very moral strong argument to remove untouchability from the whole country. So I'm not into a blame throwing that this is the person, as Buddha had said, start with yourself. Right. This was, I think, this is the so education to me is the key factor. We have to start. Why should 54% of the government schools in Gujarat, as according to our survey, they have different lines of children in the midday meal? So this is where it starts.
Right.
Yeah.
I'll share a little factoid concerning my journey in journalism. When we were young cub reporters, just entered, we decided that we'll go, 4 or 5 of us reporters in the Indian Express at that time, we decided we'd go to areas, far-flung areas, on the basis of those 2-line reports that used to be used as fillers in newspapers about atrocities against Dalits, right?
Yeah.
So I decided to do a rape, to go and find out the whole socio-political kind of structure. I mean, we weren't just going to report the fact that somebody has been raped or a Dalit girl has been raped, but what is the milieu, the circumstance, etc. And mine was really in Basti, in far-flung UP. You had to go in a ferry. It was completely lawless at that time, totally lawless. Yeah. Anyway, to cut all that experience short, when I went there, and of course, the Dalits were terrified, completely subjugated. And I suspect if I go back there today, there won't be that much of a difference. The reason the news came out was because one young Dalit boy from there had got a job in a factory. And when he heard of this rape, he told some stringer who filed it. The second thing was the political, the entire structure, from the police to the administration to the local administration, everything was uppercast and weighed against the Dalits, who were in a majority, in a substantial figures in that area. So this has continued, right, Mr. Macwan, that we have not been sensitive to the Dalit, politically or socially, even while we talk about it. So we haven't given that infrastructure. While there is social discrimination, which is also very difficult to fight, politically, the Congress, since you raised it, has never really provided that infrastructure whereby the Dalit can get justice and can speak up for rights.
True. I mean, the kind of focus and attention that we had on the question of removing untouchability before independence, that is something completely missing post-independence. Yes. Number two, our prejudices have strengthened along with the so-called education, modernization, and development. Often they used to call me to give a lecture at the National Judicial Academy in Bhopal, which is training all the judges of the country. And I remember once, 3 years ago when I was there, all the district judges of all over the country were there. And there were heated exchange because of my previous speaker on the question of untouchability and atrocity. Yeah. And then they asked me to intervene, and I said, I agree that there are no atrocities, which is increasing in the country. So they all were pacified. Yes, that's the correct position. Yeah. So I said, but does it mean it's happening? Yeah. They are not increasing, but do they happen? Yeah. So they were quiet. Why should this happen? And then I said, just to get your opinion, how many of you feel that the Atrocity Act must be removed? It's a bad act. Seema ji, you won't believe, about 75% of the judges raised their hand. Now, this is the prejudices which is not public domain, right? This is something which I cannot control. I can fight a politician, I can fight a police officer. How do I fight a judiciary and their prejudices?
Has it become much worse, or would you say over these years? I'm not talking of the political onslaught alone, but in society.
It has become worse. To my understanding, this has become worse, So the forms have changed, so you won't find the blatant forms of physical untouchability, like, you don't sit here and you don't sit there because of the rapid urbanization. But look, when it comes to marriages, it comes to employment, it comes to education, higher education, it comes to implementation of reservation, immediately you will see, scrap the screen, a little layer of the screen, and you see them coming up to you. And worst is, this is something not being talked about at all. Yes. So we have an annual report which is being presented to the parliament each year without any discussion, although, on the amount of atrocities which are happening. There's not a single report coming out on the question of untouchability. The levels of discrimination which is happening in our country today, which should be a major concern. So this is where it has lost its focus so far as all the political parties are concerned, including Congress, and all the parties. I mean, left, the left did not want to accept in the first place that there is something called caste. It was the first time when Mr. Bardhan was there, he sent me a resolution passed in the Politburo during, the Durban conference. If you remember, you had written also that time. The first time that we are against this caste. That was the first time, and now for the first time, they have a member of the Politburo at the 75th year of Indian independence. Yes. So this is so to say one thing and to be able to put that into practice and to your programs, as you rightly said, the space, that's something very different,
Yeah.
And,
so the BJP is sort of obviously very much, it's a frontal attack at levels because it's got a very clear-cut mandate from the upper caste. But again, in Uttar Pradesh, you would see that a lot of the Dalits were voting for the BJP, and locally the BJP workers were moving in and convincing them that they should vote for them. So that, that whole full understanding that the political parties are exploiting them, whether it's the BJP to a great extent today or the Congress to a slightly lesser, I don't know, less or not lesser extent yesterday, that realization is not going in, getting into the Dalits, despite the fact that there is a political awareness to some extent.
So this is something I learned while I was in the villages. I spent so many years in the village, and I came across a system which is called Rampatra, a cup of tea or a saucer, which is normally kept outside the house, every house in the villages, even today. And when the Dalits are invited for tea, they say, okay, get your Rampatra. And they put it on the floor and then they serve tea. And I was wondering why. Now, so what has happened is that they saw Dalits had put all their forces behind the Congress immediately after independence. And that time they were very conscious that they were not following the guidance given by Dr. Ambedkar himself, so neither they went for Buddhism so much, nor they went anti-Congress, because Congress was the majority rule of law. Yes. Okay, when suddenly that fall happened, and then even the third front didn't work and the BJP is getting stronger, some sections feel that to be safe, you have to be always with the majority. So even when I know that this is my humiliation, I accept in the Rampatra. Now, this has caused a friction within the community where the young people are completely radical and the old people are sticking to the old equations. Now, so this is the change which is happening within the Dalit community. But unfortunately, all the forces are not coming together. Now, one of the biggest problem is because of reservation, we have more than 84 members of parliament, but they're divided into 17 political parties. They are more loyal to their political party than to the community. The reservation was brought into practice to basically say that this is not your representation as a person, but this is your communal representation. That philosophy has been lost completely, So one MP will die and then his son or the daughter will become the MP, as if it is the hereditary kind of thing. And none of them will come together on the question of caste issues. So there is a gap between the political leadership and the community. So these are the forces, and worse, economy is getting worse and worse. I mean, that unemployment is rising.
Yeah, all over, yes.
All groups, and migration is going up, and
so, I just want to, before we completely change the issue, when you've talked about this, there's also, like arrests, like the recent arrest of Jignesh Mevani, for instance. Now, does that terrify the community and people like you in civil society who are standing up for all these issues, or is it something that you take in your stride?
So, I think more than terrified, this has angered the community a lot at the moment. And we are ourselves are holding program in about more than 1,000 villages day after tomorrow on the 1st of May, which happens to be the foundation day of Gujarat. Dalits will gather, assemble in a place, put off all the electricity equipments, including lights and TVs, and put a light lamp so that they can see only the preamble of the Constitution. They're going to be public oath taking ceremony led by the women in all these villages, that we will be loyal only to the Indian Constitution and to no other force, and we are not going to be the handles for caste and communal politics.
But it's interesting that while you're doing that, in Gujarat, there's so much factionalism amongst the Dalits on an even day. I mean, you've come together on this issue, but there's so many little groups, you know, and who don't support each other. And the same is true now of UP with Mayawati's going down. So where is the hope? How do you cement it? You will come together after, you know, people will come together after some incident or like the arrest of Mivani. But how do you sustain it?
That's a big question. I mean, definitely that right now everybody is together.
Yeah.
But this means that there has to be independent civil space where the process of educating the masses has to continue systematically. Something like what Now Sajan has been doing it for now over 32 years. I've been personally doing it for now 42 years. Now, unfortunately, you know, government thinks organization like mine, they're doing anti-national activities. So what they can do is withdraw your FCRA number. Yeah. Government has decided to make sure that none of these organizations, which actually are into process of public education, they are able to operate themselves. Now, unfortunately, while in all other countries, you know, there is a protection of, I mean, the promotion of the civil rights, and there's a space provided by the state, India is an example which is going completely into a different direction. I'm sure India is not alone. There is Pakistan also, and there is Sri Lanka and Bangladesh also are following the same line.
South Asia is got new parameters of their own, actually.
That's true. Yes. So that is something unfortunate. So, for example, we have, we have completely no resources, financial resources. When we made this coin, the coin has been completely with the contribution of the community. Or the program that we're holding day after tomorrow in support of Jignesh, it's all community funded kind of thing. Now, this means the government does not want Dalits to become independent citizens who have their dignity. This is one short summary.
Okay.
Yeah. So we had, Mayawati who started this, Kashiram who started this party in UP. And many of us as young reporters, because we were taught to question, so we were questioning him and his reasons, etc. But having said that, over the years, the Bahujan Samaj Party, strangely enough, did capture a certain kind of sentiment in UP, which was extended across the Dalit factions to quite an extent. Now it is reduced again to the lowest of the low, poor chaps in UP and amongst the Dalits. But even in this election, when Mayawati didn't move, she didn't go anywhere, even then she was able to command a certain kind of a loyal, legit following, right? So do you think the answer really lies not in all these civil organizations, but, of course, civil society will continue, but in actually a solid Dalit alternative in a political form? Or do you think that will marginalize it and in the long term make it more difficult?
So what we suffer at the moment is the consequences of the political culture. The kind of politics that we had immediately after independence and before independence was of a very, very different nature of politics. Gandhi or Sardar or Nehru never had that security around them. They could mingle around the crowds and, even Ambedkar and all that. There was a very healthy debate. People used to sit across and debate and try to understand each other's viewpoint. Today, the characteristics of the politics is you need a lot of money, You need no debates. You need complete intolerance to the views of the others.
Like,
Now,
yeah.
exactly. And this is not going to solve any problem. On the contrary, they're going to worsen the inequity and the unequal relationship between the groups of people. So there has to be a judicious mix of the politics and the what I call the culture of the social movements. Just like, as important as it is to fight the elections, I think even more important is the whole process of political education for the masses. I mean, I'm running a vocational school called Dalit Shakti Kendra of Ahmedabad. We have more than 10,500 graduates by now. Young Dalit, tribal, minority, men and women come. They are graduates. Many of them are graduates and postgraduates, along with those who have not gone to school. You ask them about the Gram Panchayat, they will have information about who is the Sarpanch, but they have no idea what is Taluka Panchayat or Jilla Panchayat. Forget the assembly and the parliament. So they have become graduates, but they have no understanding of what politics is, right? And this is also the whole question of higher education. I've been interviewing a lot of people who do their PhD from the prestigious universities on health conditions of tribals, but on questioning, you find out they never had a night stay in the families of the tribals, never taken a meal with the tribals, or not even a glass of water. Right? So this is the, to build a nation, to build a society, the role of education is the most dominant role, which I think we have completely ignored. And therefore, for politicians today, you need 100 people who can do dhamal at any point of time, break things, spend a lot of money, and that's called successful leadership, right? So this is where I think even the parties like Bahujan Samaj Party also completely failed, because I traveled a lot in the UP villages and I could see the distance between the masses. I went to a village where a Dalit woman, two women were gang raped about 18 months ago. And when that time Mayawati was the chief minister, and there was no FIR that had happened there. They say we're investigating the case, and after the investigation, we will file the FIR. I said, who told you FIR is the first step of the investigation? Yes, but this is what's happening, and I think all the political leadership, even including Dalits, believe that once you are elected, then you have nothing to do with your masses. On the contrary, you have a much more active role in public education. Yeah, this is what I call the civil society space, which is very essential. Yeah.
Right. So it has to be a mix of the political and the social, obviously.
Sure.
And not necessarily the religious, right? Because this will be my last question. But as you indicated earlier, that Islam was one of the religions that Dalits were looking at, and Christianity, when they were converting and looking for, equal space, equal rights. And I remember as long as 15, 18 years ago, I met this young, very smart Dalit man in Eastern UP, and he had just become a Buddhist. And I asked him then, why? How come? And he says, well, this is one religion where I don't feel like a Dalit, whereas anything else, you guys treat us like this. True?
True. That's a fact. I mean, I just was with part of a lot of big meeting with the Muslim leaders. And they had asked me what my views, why we can't have collaboration between Dalits and Muslims. And I said, that's not true. Dalits and Muslims, because we have the same food and same economic status, and they are the neighbors, natural neighbors. I mean, I grew up as a boy from a poor family, and my sister got married. We had nothing. And the Muslim woman with whom we used to buy meat from, she came in her, those clothes, after a day of business. And she sat in her home and she unfolded her dress and took out all her golden ornaments and gave it to my mother, saying, "Bitiya ka shadi isse karwa lo." I mean, that was the kind of relationship that was there, because the community had common programs.
So at the end of the day, it has to be a human relationship, not
Exactly.
necessarily a religious
Exactly.
relationship, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Macwan. I think this was very interesting, and we were able to take a peep into the past, which is also important because we live so much in the present that we don't always turn back and look at all the lessons that are lying in our history for us.
Sure.
And this is History Dalit Month, so all the more so. Thank you so much. Take care.
My pleasure. Thank you. Nice meeting you. Yeah.
Well, as you can see, the issue of untouchability remains 75 years after independence. Dalits are still struggling to get an equal space in society, their spot in the sun, as it were, with the system heavily weighed against them. How this is going to pan out, how will India develop when a large percentage of its population remains discriminated against, is a question that we tried to answer during the freedom struggle, but forgot all about it, deliberately so it seems, in the subsequent decades.